responsibilities at this point, but in terms of my fiduciary responsibilities, I haven't executed them yet. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. As Doctor stated, the two additional post-mortem examinations will be conducted tomorrow. We'll have additional information relative to the results of those examinations tomorrow. Again, I would implore you, as has been stated many times, we're asking for privacy for the families. As we've stated before, the Colonel has in fact assigned a trooper and or officers to each family to provide an open line of communication to them from us, and they will be with the families at all times in an effort to instill that privacy. We do have a list of the deceased. I'd ask you to share. We'll put it up on our website if you don't get one. Trooper Grant will be out behind us. She'll be handing out. Please take one per unit, if you will. And again, if you don't get one, it'll be on the website within the hour. I'm sorry? Any search engine to the Connecticut State Police website. Okay, I'll take any brief questions. Again, understanding, please, that this still is an active case. We still are working. We are still actively pursuing leads, and we're still anticipate to do so for the next 24 to 48 hours. Sir? And we didn't discuss the location of any of the weaponry at all. There's been a lot of speculation out there relative to the location of the weapons, and we'd like to do that when we have additional cohesive information to give to you about the caliber, about the ownership, and about... So I'm going to hold that question for probably tomorrow morning. Okay? Yes, sir. Okay, I can... First question I cannot answer. I'll have to get that information for you. I don't know. It's that simple. The second question is, there has been talk and speculation about that, but in conversations with the superintendent and the authorities here in town, there is no information about any confrontation.
Lieutenant, what was the mother doing this sort of weaponry in her house when she had a son that had some ventilation?
That's certainly something that we need to look at, and our investigators will, again, peel back the onion, look at the layers, and try to answer all those questions in their investigation. Again, we'll have to examine that, sir. Yes, ma'am. There is no reports, or no reports filed of any altercation in the school involving the individual. I can just simply tell you that we have not officially identified it at this time, and it's our policy until positive identification and the postmortem is complete. We can't discuss any of the facts and circumstances of a deceased. Yes, sir. No, sir. Speaking with the superintendent, there was no relation at all. One more question. One more question. What's very important to note, and I'd be neglectful not to mention this, the support from people not only in the community, but first of all, especially in the community of Newtown, has been outstanding. The support outside of the community has been more than outstanding. The outpouring of assistance, the offer of help, as has been reported, not only is Newtown police involved, state police involved, we have federal authorities, other state agencies, other local police departments, other paraprofessionals, professionals. They're all here in support of the family. Certainly we're even attempting, and we will, and we have provided support for the first responders, the fire, police, EMS, and we're going to continue to do that, and we'll do that as long as necessary. I'm going to thank you for this. I'm going to simply say to you that this is the last briefing for today. All right, we will be here tomorrow morning. I'll give you any updates tomorrow morning, but there will be no more briefings or interviews. If anything were to breaking news, I would direct you to our website. We will post it on our website. Again, we don't anticipate anything as our investigators continue their work. No, there's nothing more today. Nothing more at all.
Do you know what time the female was shot the second?
We don't know, sir. I can't discuss that. I'm not going to read the names. I'll provide copies. I have some. Kelly Grant, Trooper Grant is back there with other copies.
What time it was?
Probably tomorrow.
That would be Lieutenant Vance from the Connecticut State Police. He's the man who has been holding all of these press conferences over the last 24 hours plus. He said a couple of things about the case. Before he began, he really mentioned that he was once again going to plead for the families of these children who have been killed in this terrible tragedy. They would be left alone, left in solitude. He's assigned each family. He reminded us, a trooper, to make sure that that happens. He said a couple of things about the case still being active, and he said there's still information that they're still trying to get about the caliber of the weaponry, the ownership of the guns, and so they have no information at this point that they are releasing officially, at least in this kind of press conference format. He said they haven't even officially identified the alleged shooter, and they're waiting for the post-mortem that we know will take place tomorrow. But he also pointed out the support of the community has been outstanding, and the support of the folks outside the community, he says, has been even more than outstanding. Before we heard from Lieutenant Vance, we heard from the medical examiner of the state of Connecticut, Wayne Garber II, and he started off by saying that his prayers and thoughts were with the entire community, had some information that he wanted to talk about. Number one, all the folks were killed by gunshots, all ruled a homicide. He believes that the children all were first graders who were killed by the gunman. He said they are working at this point from a temporary facility, taking photos, and that, in fact, by 1:30 this afternoon, all of the autopsies had been completed and the examinations had been completed on the children, and that the mortuaries had all been called, meaning at that point they would be ready to deliver the bodies back to the families of the children so far. He said that there were examinations still to be done, the shooter and his mother, the alleged shooter and his mother. Those examinations, those postmortems will be done tomorrow. He talked about the wounds. He said that the wounds were caused by one weapon, at least on those that they've looked at so far, and that was the semi-automatic rifle. He said he himself did 7 autopsies, and 2 of them were close-range shootings, and he said he used pictures from the family members to ID those bodies. Said that as long as he has been doing this, it was a very tough thing. That while he was holding up well, he has a lot of experience. He said he has not sort of collapsed emotionally yet, emphasizing the word yet, because he said this was one of the toughest things that he has seen in his career. He believes that everybody, the 26 killed, including, and then the 2 others, including the shooter and his mother, but of those 26, he says he believes that each one was hit by more than 1 bullet. Wounds described when he was asked by reporters, he said all over, and gave some details, but not very many, about the scene inside of that shooting. So we're getting a few more details from the medical examiner, who we've been waiting to hear from, and also from the Lieutenant Vance from the state police, who said that this would be it in terms of updates for the rest of the day. They've been very good at updating reporters during the day, but also reminding them that they want the family members whose children are deceased to be left alone, left in solitude as they are grappling with this terrible, terrible circumstance. So that is their update from this evening press conference, the last one of the day, and of course they were then able to release the names of those who've been killed, they've already done the postmortems on. So that is where it stands right now. Deb Fayrick is updating for us some other information as well, and I want to throw it right back to Deb. Deb?
Yeah, and Soledad, what we're learning, a law enforcement source with detailed knowledge of this investigation is telling our colleague Rita Cosby that no suicide note has yet been discovered on or near the alleged shooter, Adam Lanza. Apparently, he did live alone with his mother. That is consistent with earlier reports that after a separation followed by a divorce, that he was with his mother living in that home. The mother, there's a big question as to why this school, why this particular school. Well, it appears that the mother, according to this source, was not a teacher at the school. She may have had a minor role, a substitute, or an aide. They're still looking into what she did there, but she was definitely not an on-staff teacher, according to this source. From everything law enforcement has seen so far, the alleged shooter acted alone, Authorities are further looking into what he may have suffered from, what his mental issues were, his mental state, his mental condition. The source would not provide any details, nor would police, as a matter of fact. They're refusing to speculate on any possible mental conditions that he may or may not have had. They are checking, investigators are checking to see who the shooter, Adam Lanza, the alleged shooter, knew, either socially, professionally, who his teachers were, what doctors he may have been seeing. Including, there's still a father in this picture who lives in another town a couple of miles away. They're trying to learn as much as they can about this young man and why he did what he did. Also, we're being told by investigator Soledad that the mom, again, not clear whether she was a substitute or whether she may have been unemployed, but it doesn't seem, at least not right now, that financial issues played any sort of a role in what happened or why it happened. The source also said there was a question of identification. Initially, the brother, Ryan Lanza, had been identified as the potential shooter, but apparently we were told that by authorities that the alleged shooter, Adam Lanza, did not have any identification on him belonging to his brother when he was found. And you know, Soledad, you commented on it, and I noted it as well, that the parents were not even able to identify their children by going to see their children. The medical examiners actually took photos so that the parents could identify their child, their children that way. And that just has to be so painful, so overwhelming. And right now, as so many people are overwhelmed with grief and sadness and pain, missing their loved ones, trying to understand what happened, trying to understand what cannot be understood.
Welcome, everybody. We're coming to you live this afternoon as we continue to cover an absolute tragedy here in Connecticut, the Connecticut elementary school shooting. Lots to update you on, as in the last few minutes we have had an update from the Connecticut State Medical Examiner and also the state police here giving us some of the latest details about this case. You just heard a moment ago Deb Barrett giving us the very latest information coming to us from details about the shooter. And of course, at this point, there are really no more words. Only hope, I guess, in some ways, that the families of those who have lost everything, their prized possession, their children's families here in Newtown, Connecticut, will someday be able to find their way through this terrible grief, and then the nation will come to grips with yet another terrible tragedy. So we begin today with what we know so far about this school shooting. All the victims have now been removed from the school. They've been identified. Postmortems have been done. Sources told investigators that the alleged shooter, Adam Lanza, was involved in an altercation at Sandy Hook Elementary School with 4 adults on Thursday, and that 3 of those adults were killed on Friday. But we just heard an update a moment ago coming to us from a law enforcement source where he said that they had no information, of fact, about a confrontation. So that is some contradictory information about what happened there. We also know that Lanza supposedly tried to buy a gun at a sporting goods store near Newtown on Tuesday. He was unsuccessful. No details at this point, though, on why exactly he was unsuccessul. He lived alone with his mother, Nancy, who he killed before he went on that rampage at the school. His mother was not a teacher, we now know, at the school. But she may have had some kind of a role at the school as a substitute teacher or possibly an aide. Lanza did not have his brother Ryan's identification on him when, in fact, his body was found. That was other contradictory information that we were hearing yesterday. So all of this, at this point, leaves us with many more questions and answers about a possible motive of the suspected shooter. Mary Snow has a closer look at that for us.
Shortly after Friday's horrific shootings, police and SWAT teams descended upon the Lanza home. You can't see it, it's behind me, and is closed off by police. And investigators are now suggesting that they are piecing together information leading to possible answers about how and why this happened. Lieutenant Paul Vance of the Connecticut State Police saying that, in his words, good evidence is being recovered, but he did not go into detail. In terms of the weapons used, we do know that 3 weapons were recovered at the scene of the shooting near the suspect's body. There were 2 handguns and a semi-automatic rifle. CNN has been reporting that those guns were purchased by his mother, Nancy Lanza. Now, there's not much we do know about Nancy Lanza. We spoke to a neighbor earlier in the day, and she said that she knew her, but there was nothing out of the ordinary that she could see.
She was like a normal anybody else in this neighborhood. decorate the house, and the house was always, pristine, and I mean, she was just like any other housewife.
As for Adam Lanza, former classmates describe him as being a smart student, someone who was quiet, kept to himself. A neighbor who knew him in recent years described him as troubled. Mary Snow, CNN, Newtown, Connecticut.
I want to bring in Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Let's first talk about the children, post-traumatic stress. As the day goes on, you see some of the parents walking around with their children, coming to some of these memorials that have sort of been set up. Is that a good thing, or is it a better thing to not bring the children around?
Everyone we've been talking to, and we went to the crisis center, which has been set up here at another elementary school, Reed Elementary, and the people that you talk to over there say it is a good thing. And in fact, if you go to that parking lot, I didn't know what to expect there. Obviously, it's set up at a different school, but it was full, some of that. And what I also noticed is that people were going in, families, small children, and they were staying for a long time. So this wasn't a sort of quick in and out sort of thing. The whole elementary school sort of set up as a counseling center. So psychiatrists, psychologists, children's counselors specifically in there. So they're encouraging this, and the way that they sort of put it to me is you think about the community sort of as an individual itself, meaning that the idea that people all sort of realize that they're in it together at least does something to mitigate those feelings of isolation, which can be so problematic. So good thing is what I'm hearing. Everything that you're seeing around you right now, this is, I think, what they want.
What will they do for the children? I mean, Kate Baldwin had a remarkable story of a little boy. She talked to his parents who ran past the shooter as he was opening fire, killing his teacher and killing some of his classmates. I mean, how does a child like that, who at this moment, she described him as sort of calm and matter-of-fact and helpful to detectives, but one has to imagine down the road he's going to be completely traumatized.
Yes, and PTSD is something we're used to talking about with adults, but I did a little bit of research because there's some studies on looking at kids specifically, and what you find is after this sort of thing, especially if someone has seen the violence. This is a big sort of pivot point. Being in the school, obviously, problematic. Being in the community, obviously, of concern, even in this country. But if you see something, the rates are much higher. As you might guess, 77% of people, even 3 to 4 months out, had evidence of PTSD. Now, children tend to be more resilient, and by that, getting back into some sort of normal pattern of behavior seems to make a big difference. But so we talk about this stuff all the time. There isn't a lot of precedent. We like to say, hey, we got tons of studies to base this on. What you and I are talking about, what you're reporting on, is a fairly unprecedented situation in terms of its scope with this age children. So
there was a question that was thrown to Lieutenant Vance. He's the guy who's been obviously holding all of these press conferences, and they were asking about the mental state of the alleged shooter, who is, they still have not done a post-mortem on him, and they're releasing very little information. Is there a connection between these mass killings and people who are mentally ill? Is it, other people have said, I know his brother said that he had a kind of autism. He told his authorities apparently that. Is there any correlation between autism and any kind of violence? But my nephew's autistic, and I don't know of any studies that link that.
I think there aren't any studies, and there's 2 points here. First of all, I wouldn't think of autism as a mental illness. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And second of all, if you look at the studies pretty closely, what you find is that while there is a possibility of more outbursts, this sort of reactive violence, the idea of planned violence, where someone actually plans out something methodically, that just isn't correlated. In fact, the best study, the one that everyone quotes, is a study of 132 patients, not that big a study, but one of the best ones out there, and only 3 people in that 132 people study had any evidence of specific violence, and even that again was mainly reactive, not the sort of planned violence. I don't think there's a link.
As you know, if you go online, the discussion and debate around this terrible tragedy is categorized into a gun debate, into a debate about bringing awareness to mental health and a lack of help for many people in mental health issues, lots of cuts there, and where the 2 of those things intersect. And again, not a lot is known about the shooter at this point, so it's hard to really say. But talk to me about the mental health aspect. We've done a lot of conversations about guns and gun control. Many cuts we've seen in this country on mental health. And it's hard for people who are mentally ill sometimes to get help.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you bring it up because I've reported on this quite a bit, and I know you have as well. But there's this whole notion of something they call parity. And what that means is that do you treat mental illness the same way you treat physical illness? Do you treat it the same? Someone has diabetes or heart disease, they go to the doctor. With mental illness, oftentimes it's very hard to even get the diagnosis because of lack of resources, and even harder to get treatment because of lack of resources. So, it isn't always just missing the warning signs. Families may see the warning signs. Community members may see warning signs. But the question is, what do you do after that? Are there resources in place? And I think these cuts that you talk about, again, we don't know what happened here specifically, but with regard to
mental illness is involved in any way,
right,
or even that autism is involved in any way,
correct,
because we have not that much information about the shooter.
That's right, we don't know, but with regard to mental illness, more sort of globally, yeah, I mean, it's incredibly challenging to get that, and that parity issue is something that's come up, with regard to the Affordable Care Act, with regard to how we spend resources going forward, because it just isn't, it isn't on par right now with physical disease. I see that as a doctor all the time. A lot of times we can get these patients care quickly for things that you and I, can quantify, heart disease, diabetes. If you think mental illness is on the same level, it isn't in this country.
And I guess it's the intersection, at least for me, right, between mental illness and sort of access to weapons is really what ends up becoming a terrifying combination in a lot of these cases. I mean, we've covered Columbine, we've covered Virginia Tech, we've covered a number of these horrific shootings, and there never seems to be, people will always say, today is not the day to discuss it, and I'm going to disagree. I think that we have to discuss both mental illness and weapons that are available so readily in this country.
Yeah, I think you certainly, as a doctor, I think you do seize the opportunity to talk about these things. And with regard to mental illness, I mean, I think it just gets short shrift every single time. So the fact that people are paying more attention to this issue right now, it may light a little bit of a torch, and I think you're right, it is that intersection. I don't know exactly, where that intersection is going to lie exactly, how much we're going to focus on mental illness versus guns or vice versa, but I think you're absolutely right.
You have 3 daughters. They're sort of in the same age range. What do you tell them? I mean, do you let them watch TV? Do you tell them not to watch TV? Do you explain why you're here reporting, or do you not tell them things?
They haven't been watching television, but they still know. And I think that's one thing that's probably changed even since our kids were born, Soledad. We used to think by turning off the television that could insulate them. It doesn't. My 7-year-old still knew because social media and her friends in school are talking about it. And she called me. I was actually in Los Angeles. She called me on the phone and we talked. And I said to her, I was very transparent. I mean, I didn't expose graphic details and things like that, but I think I was just very honest. It was probably one of the most honest conversations I've had with my 7-year-old.
What did she want to know?
She wanted to know if this could happen in her school, was I think her primary thing. And she said schools were safe. They were supposed to be safe. That's what she asked me.
How do you answer that?
Well, I told her,
because schools aren't safe. I mean, Exhibit A is a school's not safe.
Right. I said for the most part they are safe, but obviously this happened. I said this never happened to me when I went to school. It never happened to your mommy when she went to school. But obviously happened here. And we're going to do our best to try and keep you safe. But yeah, I mean, I was just very honest, I think, with her. I think not being honest probably is the wrong answer. As much as it's maybe your tendency to try and protect as a parent, but it just doesn't seem to be the right way to deal with it.
Yeah, my kids always want to know if someone died. Did anybody die?
Yeah,
that's always their question.
And I told her, yeah, she knew that, and I confirmed that for her.
Oh, such a terrible story. Sanjay, thank you. We appreciate your insight on this. A couple of things we now know about this case. Police are telling us that the gunman forced his way into Sandy Hook Elementary School. No one let him in voluntarily. The school had recently installed a new security system. In fact, the principal who came to that school in 2010 had created that new security system. So doors would lock at 9:30 a.m. Visitors were supposed to ring a bell, and then they'd have to get clearance from the front office to walk through those locked doors. They'd have to be let in. We don't know whether the shooter burst into the school and started shooting before or after 9:30 a.m. We want to get to Lou Palumbo. He's a retired Nassau County police officer in New York. He now heads a security agency. So Lou, we keep having these discussions, right? How do you prevent this tragedy? And some people will say it's about guns, and other people, as Sanjay and I were just talking about, will say it's about mental health, and other people will say, well, examine the school and put a guard or a police officer or something at the school. What do you think the answer is?
Well, I said in an earlier discussion, Soledad, that I don't believe in single causality. I think that there are a number of issues that have to be addressed. Clearly, we have to address the gun issue in our country. I am a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I'm not a fool. we have a problem. We have a problem with mental health. If we're really going to revert to putting armed security at every school in our country, I think we have a rather huge undertaking, and I'm not convinced that that's the method. I do think that for schools, though, they should have a type of safe room which could be used as a classroom. In other words, you change or upgrade the quality of the door and the locks, therefore it makes it very difficult to penetrate them or breach them. And as far as the entry into the school, the schools are on the right track. They want to buzz you in. The problem again, and as we saw in this instance, this individual was determined to enter the school. He got in. I don't think that we're going to come to any type of overnight solution to what transpired here today. I think we have to really just wrap our arms around the gravity of it, and in our hearts know that we want to prevent it and come to a common ground instead of making this a political issue, which is what it's becoming right now, and also an educational issue for the public. This thing about weapons in our country is disturbing. It's irrefutable. There are approximately 300 million of them that we keep repeating this number. We need to address who gets them, how they get them, how the people are vetted when they acquire them, training issues, education as to safeguarding, dealing